crossroads of the Great Lakes, the Straits of Mackinac, from water or land, presents a spectacular sight. However, for mariners, this passageway where Lakes Michigan and Huron meet is also laden with dangers. Islands, reefs, and shoals, especially when shrouded by fog or under stormy waters, or choked with ice floes, present ship captains and crews with a treacherous and sometimes deadly maze. Since 1849, the Straits has wrecked 78 ships. Its bottom is a graveyard of hulls. All peoples have used the waters of the Great Lakes for transportation. Native Americans used birch bark canoes, light and easy to maneuver. Sailing vessels were rare in the years of European exploration, but the fate of two of the earliest used on the Straits foreshadowed later dangers. The first sailing ship on the upper Great Lakes, LaSalle's Griffin, was lost in northern Lake Michigan in 1679 on a return voyage from Green Bay. A little more than a century later, the sloop Welcome, built at Michilimackinac, was wrecked in a Straits of Mackinac storm in 1781. The age of sailing steamships began in earnest after the War of 1812, as the Great Lakes region was settled. By 1820, sailing vessels were commonplace, and steamers were appearing in greater numbers. Ships carried grain, iron ore, lumber, coal, manufactured goods, and passengers. By the late 1880s, the number of vessels using the port of Chicago nearly equaled that of New York, with 20,000 arrivals and departures in the 8-month navigation season. The majority of the vessels traversing the lakes passed through the Straits of Mackinac. Its importance and danger is shown by the fact that the second lighthouse on Lake Huron was built on Boblo Island in 1829, and the first lightship on the Great Lakes was stationed at the western end of the Straits at Waugoshance Shoal in 1832. By 1900, a dozen lighthouses were located throughout the region. Although lighthouses could not ensure safe passage, these aids to navigation gradually improved safety conditions, as did other forms of technology, including ship construction, radio communication, and radar. Most of the wrecks in the Straits occurred before 1890 and were older, wooden-hulled sailing vessels. Nearly half were caused by being driven into a reef or shoal, with the remainder occurring due to collisions or ice damage. Over half occurred in the fall, most of the others in the spring. Most were downbound, traveling from the west. The western entrance is the most dangerous part of the Straits, due to the lack of safe harbor for a ship in distress. Often a wreck was a combination of several factors, including bad weather, bad timing, bad luck, and bad judgment. This is illustrated by 4 famous Straits of Mackinac wrecks. Prior to 1860, many ships on the Great Lakes were brigs. Brigs had 2 masts with square sails. Although prized for their speed, they were less maneuverable than a schooner-rigged vessel, a distinct disadvantage on the Great Lakes. The constricted Straits of Mackinac could be especially hazardous to a brig. One that failed this challenge was the Sandusky. Today, the Sandusky rests 80 feet beneath the surface, 5 miles west of Old Mackinac Point. On September 16, 1856, the 8-year-old brig departed Chicago with a cargo of grain and a crew of 7. 2 days later, the Sandusky found northern Lake Michigan in the grip of a powerful storm and was thrown out of control in heavy winds. The crew manned the bilge pump, the last hope for keeping the Sandusky afloat, as she took on water and began sinking. Alerted to her plight, the side-wheeler Queen City set out from Mackinac Island to attempt a rescue. When they arrived on the scene, they found the ship sunk, with 3 sailors clinging to the spar. In the face of gale-force winds, the captain of the Queen City could not maneuver his ship close enough to save the 3 men. They were ultimately abandoned to the same fate as their 4 fellow crew members. In Lake Huron, 5 miles from Old Mackinac Point, lies the William H. Barnum. The wood-hulled steamer is upright and mostly intact, At the time of her sinking, she was in poor condition, scheduled for major repairs. With 55,000 bushels of wheat, the Barnum left Chicago on April 1st, 1894, the first day of the shipping season. 2 days later, she was the first of the fleet to reach the Straits. Here, the Barnum encountered heavy weather and extensive ice flows. The poor condition of the vessel was no match for the choppy water and battering ice. Her seams opened up and water poured in. The pumps fell behind as she passed Mackinac City, and the Barnum sounded the distress call on her whistle. Answering, the tug Crusader attempted to beach her. With ice blocking the shore, it proved impossible, and the crew was soon evacuated. Both crews watched from the deck of the tug as the Barnum sank to the bottom of the Straits. Four and a half miles west of Old Mackinac Point rests the Eber Ward, a wood-hulled steamer. Now beneath the murky waves, she sank on a clear and calm April day in 1909. 2 days before, she had been loaded with grain in Milwaukee. Her steam engines brought her toward the Straits. 6 miles west of Mackinac City lay what appeared to be a slushy floe of windrow ice, a final remnant of the passing winter. It was judged no danger, and the captain moved the Eber Ward forward, intending to easily pass through it. The judgment proved wrong. As the ship entered the ice floe, the timbers of the bridge shook and twisted. The ice floe was solid ice and cut 2 large holes in the wooden bow. The Eber Ward filled with chilly water, which quickly flowed up the deck. Within 10 minutes of impact, the ship sank, carrying 5 men with her. May 7, 1965 found the Straits of Mackinac shrouded in a dense fog. Fog signals were sounding from the Mackinac Bridge, and east and westbound ships were moving blind into the Straits. One of these, under the command of Captain Martin Joppick, was the westbound Cedarville, an aging 588-foot freighter loaded with limestone from calcite near Rogers City to Gary, Indiana. Despite the fog, the Cedarville, following U.S. Steel Company policy, was moving at full speed. Ahead of her was the American ship Steinbrenner. 3 miles east of the bridge, visibility dropped to less than 1,000 feet as the Cedarville made radio contact with the German vessel Weisenberg approaching from the west. A port-to-port passage was arranged. However, the Weisenberg reported to the Cedarville that there was a Norwegian vessel ahead of her, also heading east. The Steinbrenner confirmed that they had just passed this Norwegian ship, the Toppdalsfjord, and warned that she was not answering radio calls. Under these conditions, Joppick should have taken evasive action. However, he only reduced speed slightly, did not properly signal, and ordered erratic course changes. Cedarville and Toppdalsfjord were bound for a collision. Tension mounted on the bridge as the reality of the situation set in. As the two ships appeared to each other out of the fog, Captain Joppick ordered a turn in a desperate attempt to clear the vessel. Unfortunately, this only provided a wider target.
Next thing, there she's coming out of the fog, guys. Cook was at the radars there, and he says, "Geez, Cap, she's closing in on us." I looked over there, 45 degrees off the port bow. I could see the bow coming out of the fog. That's it, I'm gonna get hit. Well, put her hard left, try to swing around, too late, you know. If it had been earlier, maybe, you know, or if you had the distance, it might have been done.
The Toppdalsfjord crashed into the port side of the Cedarville, tearing a deep hole. She backed up and disappeared into the fog. Although damaged, the Toppdalsfjord remained seaworthy. As the Cedarville took on water, the anchor was dropped, the general alarm sounded, and a Mayday broadcast. Captain Jopik telephoned his plight to company officials in Pittsburgh. Based on their direction, the crew was not evacuated, even though the Weisenberg made repeated requests to help remove the crew. At 10 minutes past 10, Jopik raised anchor and attempted to beach her at Mackinac City. 15 minutes later, and still 2 miles from the beach, the Cedarville suddenly rolled over to starboard and sank in 105 feet of water.
I could see the big water fountain, water shooting about 15-20 feet up in the air. That was from the air that came out of the Cedarville.
The course selection for beaching, 4 miles from the collision site, proved the final tragedy, as 2 other locations could have been reached in time.
Well, if it was me, I would have put it right up on Boys Blank Island right there. I wouldn't have hesitated.
Even the captain for my ship, when we were together, he said, why the heck he tried to beach the ship? Not a bad idea, he says, but he stared around and went to the deeper water, and that's where she went down.
When the ship rolled, several men were trapped below decks. Most were thrown into the 37-degree water.
There's a lot of things that run through your mind. What are you going to do next, you know? I said, well, when the water hits me, I'll take a deep breath and let go. I start going down. Got this suction. I'm looking through my eyelids, and first the water's light, and then it's getting darker and darker. Pretty soon it's black. I start praying. I started on the Hail Marys. By the time I finished 5 Hail Marys, I start going up. I shot right out of the water, clear of the water. My feet probably were in the water, but my whole upper body was right out of the water, went right back down. Took one good grasp of air, went down, then finally come back on the surface.
27 men were rescued by the Weisenberg, which had followed the Cedarville. 1 was dead, and 1 later died from exposure.
In the water temperature like that, the body just gives up after 15 minutes, and lucky for Cedarville crew that the Weisenberg was close by, and the way our captain handled it by having the lifeboats ready, so we didn't waste any time.
Finally, I see him coming my way. Oh, and I really hollered and screamed and whistled. And, yeah, they're coming. Just get my hands all, just barely got them out like that over the gunwale. And that was it. I don't remember anything.
So he was under shock. He was screaming. He didn't know where he was. And we had him in the boat, and then he tried to jump in.
The survivors were cared for aboard the Weisenberg. The injured quickly transferred by the Coast Guard cutter Mackinac to the hospital in Sheboygan.
A lot of the Cedarville crew, they were thankful that they tried to give us money for the rescue, and of course you don't do that. It's brought off the sea, you know.
8 men remained missing. Bodies of 5 of them were recovered within a few days. The remains of 2 others were later found near the wreck site. 1 man is still missing.
When I come down to get the life jackets, he says, what are we going to do, Len? And I says, geez, Stash, I don't know. I got to get back in the pilot house. And that's the last I saw of him.
The Cedarville is one of 78 vessels known to have sunk in the Straits of Mackinac. To date, 35 wrecks have been discovered and identified. In addition, 6 wrecks have been discovered but not identified. In 1983, Michigan designated the Straits of Mackinac as a bottomland preserve. Within the boundaries of the preserve are 20 of the 41 discovered wrecks. These vessels are recognized as non-renewable historical resources. The protection of these wrecks was necessary because of the looting by divers, which continues today despite the protection of the bottomland preserve. The state of Michigan, through the Office of the State Archaeologist and the Underwater Salvage and Preserve Committee, works to educate divers and the general public on the importance of preserving these wreck sites so they remain as recreational dive sites, historical resources, and monuments of our maritime heritage.
where two seas are joining, between Great Lakes waters in the straits, where the large freighters glide. Underneath Big Mac's shadow, the treacherous currents where the good ships pass side by side. Beneath these blue seas, in the sight of each shoreline, through narrows where the carriers are bound, are the graves of brave sailors, from high sails to freighters, here where the Cedarville went down.
This program was made possible by Mackinac Associates, friends preserving and sharing Mackinac's heritage. Old Mackinac Point Lighthouse is owned and operated by the Mackinac Island State Park Commission, protecting, preserving, and presenting Mackinac's rich historic and natural resources since 1895.